The top 10 from last night, starting with 5 through 10, we see we've got LSU with 2 losses. This one makes no sense. They shouldn't be there. There's plenty of other one-loss teams that have played as well or better, but this is just hedging their bets that LSU potentially wins the SEC West, in my opinion. Oregon and USC, both with 1 loss. Frankly, I don't think either one of them have a shot to get in there, and I'll go through the predictions in a minute. TCU at 8-0, outside chance for them to make it in there, but the deck is stacked against them. Alabama, they got to win the SEC championship game, and then we're probably going to see 2 SEC teams in the top 4. Michigan, these guys are complaining the most out of everybody that I've been reading, thinking they got slighted. You haven't been slighted at all. Get over yourself. Basically, you and Ohio State have the exact same resume, 1 ranked win over Penn State. I do admit that your win is better than their win on paper, but the CFP Selection Committee specifically says you cannot take into account the margin of victory. So basically, they think Ohio State's better than you, and the one tiebreaker that would be there, they're not allowed to consider. So what you got to do is beat Ohio State in the last game of the season. Go on, win the Big Ten championship game, which I don't think will be that difficult, and you're in. You'll probably come in at 3rd, maybe 2nd, if all things go your way. All right, looking at the top 4, this is the one that the Michigan folks are probably most upset about, and I still don't think they've got a reason to talk about it, but they definitely think they're better than Clemson. But when you look at strength of schedule, Clemson has played a much more difficult strength of schedule up to this point. At number 3 is Georgia, and this is where things are going to get interesting because this week Georgia is going to be in a very tough battle with Tennessee. Ohio State is going to sit here at number 2 until the last week of the season when they play Michigan. The winner of that game goes on to the Big Ten championship game and basically, I think, has their spot solidified in the CFP. And lastly, in the number 1 slot is Tennessee. As I just mentioned, Georgia is going to be playing Tennessee this week. The loser of that game can easily find themselves out of the top 4. Michigan likely finds their way in, and at that point, Alabama probably will need to win the West. And if they come in and win the SEC championship game, I think you could see both the East and West divisions of the SEC represented in the top 4 brackets, just like last year. So how did the selection committee do on their first pass? In general, okay, but I mean, I'm going to have to give them more like a C plus just on the merits of their own criteria that they're supposed to use. So first of all, if we look at the criteria, this is directly off the College Football Playoff website. They come right out and say, I'm going to highlight these as I go, that presidents and athletic directors, coaches to honor regular season success while at the same time providing enough flexibility and discretion to select a non-champion or independent. Basically, what that tells me up front is they're only going to look at those non-champions or independents as a last resort or as something that stands out as an exception. But at any rate, that's what they're looking at. And it's like where that particular champion or independent is unequivocally one of the best teams in the country. So in other words, they are looking for a conference champion. Not stated, they are looking for a Power 5 conference champion. And then they go into like when teams look the same or comparable, then the following criteria must be considered. Championships won. We're too early in the season for championships won. Strength of schedule. I think we've got a lot of data on strength of schedule. Head-to-head competition if it occurred, and comparative outcomes excluding the margin of victory. So in other words, Michigan, Ohio State, I think Michigan won by 35 over Penn State, and Ohio State won by 13. That's not a criteria. They just think Ohio State is better at this stage of the game. With that criteria in mind, it's very clear who's gotten slighted here. I'm just going to read a couple of numbers off to you and let you be the judge. I've actually got a whole nother program that I'm working on that looks at the CFP versus the old BCS and how that computer model versus this committee system still is not solving the problems that we've been trying to solve for more than 20 years in here. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see that. I should have it out in the next week. But if we look at it, I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up. This is kind of a strength of schedule versus ranked wins situation. So if you look at it, Georgia has only played one ranked opponent, and that was in the first week against Oregon, and is 1-0. They have not played since then. Likewise, Michigan has played one ranked opponent and is 1-0 versus Penn State. Ohio State has played one ranked opponent and is 1-0 against Penn State as well. Remember, you are not allowed to look at the margin of victory, just whether or not you won. Working your way up from there, Alabama is 1-1 against ranked opponents. They have beat Arkansas at the time they were ranked, and their probably bigger feather in their cap is a 3-point loss to number 1 Tennessee in the current situation. Then we move on to Clemson is 3-0 and in the number 4 slot, and the one that the Michigan folks are complaining about. Clemson has beat Syracuse, Wake Forest, and North Carolina State to be 3-0 against ranked opponents. Tennessee likewise is 3-0 against ranked opponents, having beat Florida, Pittsburgh, and Alabama. Florida and Pittsburgh being ranked at the time they were played, which is more or less the criteria that is used. But the team that I think really should be slighted in all this is TCU, a small program inside of the Big 12, not necessarily getting the respect that they deserve. They are 4-0 against ranked opponents, have been underdogs going into many of these contests, but they have beat Oklahoma, who was ranked at the time. This is like the second loss that Oklahoma had. Kansas, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State. Now again, by their own admission, they are not allowed to look at the margin of victory, only whether or not they've won or lost. That being the case, at the moment, TCU has the hardest schedule and the best schedule when looked at it from those two perspectives. And if anyone should be upset, I think it's them. That's it for tonight. Have a great time. We'll see you again next week when the next round of rankings come out. Again, subscribe. I'm working on a couple of different projects right now. Should have a Big 12 review ready by the end of the week. And I'll have a very deep dive into the college football playoff history and how that lines up with the BCS in the next 5 to 10 days. If you're interested in those, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss any of them. We'll talk with you later. Goodbye.